truth is, the number of real Catholics is vanishingly small. You know, we see such a small percent at church. Probably somewhere around 10% of Catholics actually come to Mass. But of those who do come to Mass, what percent actually hold the true faith? I think it's maybe another 10% of them. So we're in a very small remnant. But our Lord did say that when he comes again, the second coming, would he find faith on earth? So he knew that there would be this collapse.
Yeah. So 10% of 10% is
1%.
1%, exactly right. See, that's what I was going to say as well. See, I'm a doctor and a father. He's a father and a doctor. He also has all these graduate degrees. What was that from? Bug Tussle Tech, or what was that? Hillbilly U? Yeah. What's the matter, U? What was that school you went to?
No one's, I think it might have closed its doors by now.
Was it Texas A&M? Is that what it was?
No one's quite sure.
You can't remember now.
No.
Or is it Boston B&M, something like that. B&M Beans. Something like that. Okay. Anyway, that's kind of interesting, I think, because we have our duties here, both of us. But you hit a couple of other things, right? In that last salvo, that last blast, and kind of going back to what I was saying before about church attendance. Okay, we know. Do we even have to say this again? We know that prior to the 1960s, church attendance in America, I don't know, it was something like 80%, yes, of people who were self-proclaimed Catholics, and now. I just read something, Archdiocese of New York, 13%. That's what the Archdiocese says.
Right.
Boston, I think 12%. These are figures that you see bandied about. I don't have a chart in front of me. And 50 years from 80%. I mean, even if you were at 50%, people who claim to be Catholics, right, down to 10, 12. I mean, that's a fantastic collapse. You can't describe it in any other way, right? I mean, some people saying less is more and the collapse is good and fuel, right? We've heard that for years too. These rationalizations that somehow, where I dug up that figure was in a recent article about more church closings in the Archdiocese of New York. And for crying out loud, Boston, LA, I mean, just pick out a city, right? Which were Chicago, which were once major Catholic centers in this country. Mm-hmm. And what can you say about that? Church closings, church sales, off for mundane purposes or profane purposes?
Sure, and you can add into the mix the utter collapse of religious orders. No more vocations to these very prominent religious orders. You can include in that all kinds of the drop in vocations to the diocesan priesthood. So really, you have to admit there's just this calamitous, complete collapse of the Church following the Second Vatican Council. And so I guess what you're driving at is, well, what caused this? And the short answer is people don't want new Coke. That's the quick answer. They don't want it.
Folks, you all remember, maybe you don't all remember, what's that, the 1980s? Coke tried to sell, what were they thinking? Coke had been around forever. By the way, Coke, of course, was created as a health drink. Did you know that? Yeah, it was supposed to be like a pick-me-up, a health drink. That's how they started in actually drugstores with the soda. And it was. And of course, then became legendary for taking rust off your bike or whatever. I don't know. That could be an urban legend. But, you know, it's funny how Coke started out, was supposed to be a health drink. Anyway, we're not talking about real Coke. We're talking about fake Coke here. But the Coca-Cola company had tried to sell this new product just for the sake of selling a new product. They were saying people were tired of old Coke, right?
It was more convenient for them because I think it didn't have the expensive ingredients that traditional Coke had.
Oh, okay. I don't even know why. I just figured it was a gimmick because they said whatever. They're tired of the old red and white stripe or something like that.
Well, they were afraid of the competition of Pepsi, and this product was cheaper. I think that was the two. They were losing some market share to Pepsi.
Okay.
And then they figured this would solve that problem, plus it would be cheaper.
Yeah, but it's interesting if you're talking about market share now, if we're getting back to the church, right? So we're using Coke as a stand-in for the church. Market share in 1960, was the church losing market share to Protestants, Muslims, Jews?
No, on the contrary.
On the contrary.
No, it was there were reports of single parishes in a year, let's say in the 50s, would be gaining 1,000, 2,000 converts. And so the church before Vatican II was extremely strong. Now, of course, nothing was perfect. You know, there were faults and problems and scandals and all that. But if you just look at church attendance and those who went to confession.
And vocations.
Oh, vocations.
In the 50s, after World War II,
sure,
there was a huge boom in vocations.
In fact, there was evidence, and sometimes they had to turn men away because
that was
they
the
didn't
case in Boston,
exactly.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was such a precipitous collapse. So while it's dangerous to say just because it happened after Vatican II, that Vatican II caused it. Well, logically, that's not always the case. But you have to consider that that's a strong possibility.